Hiya boys and girls, Brucey here, and this is a special video for Santiago. He sent me a message asking if I could do a little video on the compressor on the TC Nova system, which I have right here, if you can see that. Of course, as always with these things, the cable is just a little bit too short, but I will do a video. Well, I'll put the camera on there so you can see what I'm doing with the settings. I agree with you that the menu is probably a little bit tricky sometimes to navigate, but hopefully I'll be able to explain the concepts there. Primarily, the concept of compression is that I like to think of it, or you can see it in some regards, as volume control. I've got the volume control here on my sound card, and you're sitting there riding the level. So when a sound is loud, you kind of turn the volume down by a certain amount, and when it's quieter, you kind of boost it up by a little amount. So in a sense, squashing the signal, squashing the dynamics out of the signal, and you can achieve that by a variety of different ways and with different settings. So we'll look into these as we go through, but what I'll do here is I'm going to cut to a little video of a sound clip, which is just a pluck note on the guitar. So it'll be just the pluck note, and then with the compressor in. And what you'll see with any note on a guitar note, it has what's known as a transient, so it peaks up and then it fades away. And what a lot of compressors do, where you set the setting, is where that peaks up, you decide that at a certain point on that peak you want to bring the level down by a certain amount. So the peak becomes a little bit squashed. And as a byproduct of that, the signal gets a little bit quieter. So you then boost the level of the overall signal up a little bit more. And that's what creates a kind of sustain effect, because the tail of the signal is becoming longer, so it feels like it's sustaining on a little bit. One thing about the compressor here, and hold on a second, I'm going to now switch over to showing you the actual pedal. Bear with me a second. Okay, now we're back and we're looking at the pedal directly, and with the Nova system you engage the compressor there, so now it's on, and what we see here is hopefully without focusing in a little bit, focus in. Bear with me a second. We have three different types. We have the percussive, we have the sustain, and we have the advance. What basically percussive and sustain are two preset settings of basic compression types that TC have decided on. And percussive is quite a hard compression type, where there's a lot of a fast attack and quite a long release, which is, I guess, very similar to some of the, like the Dyna comp compressor and a lot of the stomp box compressors, used quite a lot in country music, where everything is kind of even out. You've got that percussive twang sound. And why compression's used in stuff like that is because people are plucking the notes quite hard, and it can be quite hard and abrasive. So you kind of crush down those high transients and stop them peaking as much, and the overall signal sounds a little bit more, I guess, percussive, that kind of percussive country lick kind of sound that you hear quite a lot of. And then the sustain type is where it's a little bit less softer compressing the peaks, so you're not smashing the sound down as much. You're kind of just gently compressing the transient peak and bringing up the tail of the sound and making it sound like it was sustaining, as I explained a little bit earlier. And then of course we have the final one, which is the advanced setting, which if we look over here, that's probably where a lot of the confusion starts to come in. And we see here we have a number of different pages, and the first and most important controls here are the threshold control. So the threshold here sets at what level do I start compressing. When my signal goes above a certain level, I then decide to compress the signal or turn the volume down on that signal. And how much I turn it down by is set by the ratio control. So a gentle ratio, a lower ratio setting, or with the ratio off, a lower ratio setting means that I turn the volume down by let's say if I set the rate, it's easy to explain, of a ratio of maybe 1 to 2, where if my signal is, say, 10 dB above the threshold, I will cut it down by a ratio of, by an amount of about 5 dB. I'll show this on a graph on the screen. It's a little bit easier to explain with a graph. And then the next control, so these are probably the two most important controls, and what you normally find on a lot of pedal compressors, where you set the amount. So a low threshold means that a lower threshold means that more signal will be compressed as it goes through. A higher level here means that only the very high peaks of something will be before the compressor kicks in. Secondly, the ratio, a really high ratio of infinite, means that the slope of the graph, it starts to come down. So if you have a ratio of infinity, anything above the threshold will be compressed down to the level of the threshold. So it will sound really, really squashed and compressed, and there'll be no dynamics in your playing. The next important control you have here, which is why they're all on the first page, I hope you can see this all right, is the attack control. So what the attack does, it sets how fast or how slow it is before the compressor kicks in. So with a fast compression, fast attack time, so this is a really fast attack time, as soon as the level goes above the threshold level, within 2 milliseconds, the compressor kicks in and brings that level down. If you set it really over a long time, so let's say the sound goes above the peak, it will then, the compressor will kick in after a longer amount. So you hear the transient of the note, and then the rest of the tail of the note gets compressed. So that can be quite nice when perhaps you want to hear the pick of a string. You don't want to lose that kind of pick dynamic on the string, but you want to compress the rest of the tail, or maybe sustain the rest of the tail. You'd set a longer attack time. But if you set it a fast attack time, it's going to bring that level down very quickly after you go above the peak. So any pick dynamics will be kind of compressed down very quickly. Moving on to the next page, here we have the release control. So what the release does, it's the kind of opposite of the attack control, is it sets how long the compressor is in action for. So if you set a fast release, means the compressor kicks in, brings your level down, and then turns off again. If you set a long release time, all right, wow, 2 seconds, the compressor comes down, and in this instance here, the signal will be compressed for a further 2 seconds afterwards, which is pretty immense. So you're going to get a very, very, very long tail there. Finally, the next control, and the most important one, is if you imagine that you're compressing the signal down, and okay, I'm going to switch back now so I can kind of talk to you. Hang on a second. Okay, so now I'm back with you. Okay, so what I was saying there is the level control. So imagine now, so some of the things I was showing you. So imagine this is your signal on a one-to-one basis. When it goes above the threshold here, it will slightly bring that signal down by a certain amount. So if it's 1 to 2, that level will become half of that value. And if you set it at infinity, it will become that. So the signal becomes flat. So this is your signal going up. Anything above this will be brought down. And what happens is that you make the overall signal quieter, so you have a level control, and the level control, or the auto gain, brings the level back up again to where it was, so it can make everything sound a lot louder overall. So it pumps up the volume of your compressed signal, which is quite a useful thing to do. So you can also use the compressor for a gain situation. So it's used quite a lot in country and kind of funk, because you're making everything quite percussive. What's happening there is, and I'll just check the settings again. So there we had a compression set at infinity. So everything above the threshold was just squashed down. It was very percussive. I'm going to lower the threshold a little bit now and lower the ratio, so it should breathe a little bit more. You get a little bit more dynamics, but it's still going to be quite percussive. And so my pick dynamics, you can hear a little bit of the pick coming through because I've got the attack set quite long. But it's then compressing the rest of the sound and bringing it down, giving that kind of plucky kind of quality. I'm going to make it a quick attack now. Okay, it's almost like we're losing all that kind of pick dynamic, we're losing a lot of that. It's kind of cool. So you've got the two options of percussive and sustaining. So if you're playing country or funk, you might want to check out the percussive settings. They only have two controls on the Nova system. There's the drive and the response. So the drive control is almost like a combination of threshold and ratio put together. So those two controls are working in parallel. So if you turn up the drive, you're kind of reducing the threshold and increasing the ratio together. There's like, so you've got one control controlling two controls, and then the response is how responsive it is. So it's adjusting the attack and release times. So obviously the higher you set the response, you're probably going to get a longer attack and a longer release, and if you turn that down. So that's what those two controls are. Those two settings, sustaining and perk, basically take all those other controls and put them into two controls. So I hope you found that useful, Santiago. Thanks for the question, and if you've got any more questions, please drop me a line. I'll speak to you soon. Take care.